Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Devtoberfest Week 2, Day 2. This is a continuation of the Best Practices Week. Yesterday we had a great presentation from David Kunz, and today we've got an equally great presentation from the one and only Andre Fischer. I think many of you will know Andre. Andre is an awesome person in the ABAP world and beyond. A good friend of mine. I'm very happy to be able to call Andre a good friend. Andre is wearing his SAP Champion shirt as well, and he's going to be giving a presentation on developing RAP applications in the ABAP stack, of course, and talking about what's possible and also including some recommendations as well, right? So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand over to Andre, who can now share his screen, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself as well, Andre. And I'll hand the stage to you.
Yeah. So thank you very much, DJ. So yeah, my name is Andre Fischer. I'm working in the product management of the ABAP platform, and there especially on the topics of the ABAP in the cloud. So codename Steampunk, and the ABAP restful application programming model, in short RAP. This is how it was announced here today. And yeah, and also last not least, I'm still busy with good old SAP Gateway that lots of you will still use. But now I would like to show you something about this new world. And let's share my screen. I hope you see it.
I do, and I'm just going to check on the studio, see if that's coming through as well, but I guess it will do.
Yeah, so the title is, let's say, guidance for building apps with the ABAP RESTful application programming model. So what is this talk about? So I would like to talk about RAP as such, because probably not everybody knows exactly what RAP is. And then we'll come into an overview. If you are, usually we do not start with a greenfield, but with a brownfield approach, so that you have some existing applications, how to get then into this nice new RAP world. And last not least, I would like to show an example, a huge example, to prove that SAP is actually using RAP, because we will look at this tiny application called the Business Partner. Okay, typical disclaimer is that you will see here something which is still in development. Fresh from the kitchen, probably. I would like to show it. And yeah, let's start. Big picture is why did we do this stuff with RAP? Maybe I will make this smaller. So this new programming model, you can use it for several purposes. You can develop services. That means you can that are then consumed by Fiori UIs or web APIs. And this programming model is universal now. So opposed to other programming models we had, with this Fiori programming model, you might know, based on BOP, this programming model now can be used for greenfield developments as well as brownfield developments. So that's a big advantage. And this is also very important. We use now one programming model in the cloud and in on-premise. That means applications that are built on the ABAP RESTful programming model potentially can be used in an SAP S/4HANA cloud system, because there is an upcoming version that allows you even to program ABAP, and the and on-premise, the S/4HANA and this Steampunk offering, so the ABAP in the cloud. So this is the first point. You have to use Eclipse. So that's something those that still stick to SE24 or SE38, you have to adapt. So that means the new development tool is Eclipse, because the repository objects that RAP is based on, so the basic ones, so the CDS views, they need to be developed with ADT, and also other repository objects that we have introduced newly. Languages. ABAP is still there, and it evolves, and it gets new features, and CDS views you have to create. So this is something that you can do with ABAP in Eclipse. So there you have nice development support for that. And beneath this, there are frameworks. So this ABAP RESTful programming model is not, let's say, there alone. There is a framework beneath it that can perform certain tasks for you, like the support for draft and other things. So at the bottom, we have everything starts, the development starts with the development of CDS entities. So the whole data model is based on CDS. And then we come to so-called business objects. So the data model, so root entity, child entities, and so on, they are based on CDS. But then we have a new kind of development object called BDEF in short. That's the abbreviation for behavior definition. This defines the behavior of a business object, meaning can the business object do a create, an update, a delete, or does it have actions? And okay, this is just modeling, and you also have to implement something, and this is then ABAP code. This takes place in so-called behavior implementation. Technically, it's a class or a pool, because you are writing your code in local classes. And this also new, you can also build analytical models with CDS views. So you can create cubes and dimensions. And based on this, you can also have analytical OData services. So on top of this, you have a projection layer. So we'll see it here later on when I do the demo. This, for example, the business partner is a huge business object, right? And then it's possible to create projections from it. So that, for example, for a special use case, you would only use a certain subtype of your business object, and you can also define which behavior is used. Maybe you use all the entities, but you only allow to create or only to allow update stuff, but not create, vice versa. And you have to tell the framework a little bit about how it should behave. And how the behavior is actually implemented. So some code might be necessary on that layer as well. On the analytical side of the house, we also have a projection layer that is then on top of this analytical models. That's the query then. And then there is a new object called service definition. So we create this kind of objects to define which entities of this whole model are being exposed as a service. And now it becomes interesting. We have a new there is a new object called service binding. So you remember maybe from OData service development in SAP Gateway. So you used SCGW, and then you published a service, and that was an OData version 2 service. If you wanted to go for an OData version 4 service, that's maybe then you have to start from scratch again, build a new service using the gateway APIs for OData version 4. With the ABAP RESTful programming model, it's new. You can create a binding OData service, OData version 2 or OData version 4, and this. And you don't have to change the service implementation. So everything here is the same. And we also have a service binding for analytical services, so-called ENA services, that that are then published. Finally, it's we are on the consumption side, so you can have so-called web APIs. These have less metadata opposed to Fiori or data services used for Fiori UIs. They have lots of metadata that can be used so that you can, for example, create Fiori elements UIs. So that's the recommended way to do. So that will cover most of the use cases. Still, it's still possible to build handcrafted Fiori UIs. That's also a use case. But I guess most or the majority of the services, the Fiori elements UIs will fit. And for the analytical stuff, we can consume this via SAP Analytics Cloud and have nice UIs based on this. And there's also a new thing, data integration. You can consume services in an SQL-based fashion using ODBC. So, but today we will concentrate on SAP Fiori UIs. So, what is a business object? So as said, it's a data model. So you can look at it, this hierarchy. You will have maybe a root node. If we look at the famous travel example, there will be the travel entity, and beneath there will be a booking entity, and then there another sub entity, the supplements or sales order item. And these are combined in a so-called composition tree. We'll later look in the coding. These compositions are a special kind of association that tie together this transactional model, so that from the root entity to the child entity, this is a composition of entities that make up your business object. Then I have talked about this when talking about behavior definition. You have a behavior. So data model is these are just the entities. You have to tell the framework what kind of actions you want to support, like just create, update, and delete CRUD, or do you want to have actions like approve sales order, or maybe actions like copy an item? Or would you have functions? These are read. This is a kind of read access that cannot express via SQL. You will have logs, so that we will also see with a business partner, or e-tags, so that you have the option to check whether an object has changed. We also have something like draft, where we have some kind of stateful behavior that supports then more complex UIs. Last not least, there is the runtime implementation. There we distinguish between the so-called interaction phase and the save sequence. So the interaction phase takes place when you work with UI. So you enter data, and what happens then a transactional buffer is updated, and only if you press the save button, all this data is then saved to the database. So this, and if you have enabled draft, this interaction phase can also perform lots of checks before actually saving the data, allowing you to enter more complex stuff and even save it to it, because it's saved to the database, but not persisted to the so-called active data. So this is what happens now. So we have here this, what I talked about, this transactional buffer, and in the interaction phase you have different phases like modify and read and log methods you have in this interaction phase. So the data is logged during editing, and only when I save the data, then a so-called save sequence starts, and then it starts with a finalize method, and then there is a point of no return after the check before save, when you could use so-called adjust numbers for so-called later numbering, if you want to have gap-free numbering, and then finally the data is saved. If something happens here in the end, the framework, the only chance of the framework is to respond with a dump. So then so you have to make sure that the data is correct before saving. And there we distinguish between unmanaged and so-called managed scenarios. So in an unmanaged scenario, that's for brownfield implementation, you have this interaction phase and transactional buffer and the save sequence. So you have to take care, as a developer, you have to take care about each and everything. That's positive. You can do everything, but you have to do also everything. And we will later see when to use that. And we have a so-called managed approach. There, the heavy lifting of handling the transactional buffer and so on, this is given to you by the framework. So you just have to create the tables, and also the data is saved to the tables. So nothing you have to do. You can concentrate on implementing the business logic. So we now come to these to 3 types of implementation types, and then I will later then refer to what to use when. So first one is the unmanaged approach. So think about, you have already code available, like you have written an RFC function module, or you might have you might have built a transaction already with your ABAP code. Then this unmanaged approach works like that you have to build glue code to call these you have a buffer that you are handling yourself. And then you also take care about this finalized check before save and finally the save method. Here you would then finally call your APIs that saves the data to your legacy business logic. And opposed to that, you have the managed approach. So here the framework takes care of each and everything. The code that you write is just the business logic. So in the modify phase, for example, you will build so-called validations and determinations and actions. And this you might know from the BOP approach when you use the SAP, the programming model for SAP Fiori, this ABAP programming model. There we also had this approach of using determinations and validations. And this is pure business logic, but not, you do not have to deal with the OData specifics. So that's not part of your implementation. You can concentrate on doing what a developer is supposed to do, building business logic. And this is this is the best approach if you can start from scratch. So in a greenfield approach, that's the recommended way. And then there is an option, we call it manage with unmanaged save. So that's maybe the best of 2 worlds. You leverage the managed runtime to handle the interaction phase, and only at a very late stage in the save sequence, in the save sequence, then you call a function module that performs the update tasks, so the create, update, and delete. And so if it's possible to carve out your business logic, your legacy business logic like that, you can do that. And this is an example I will show. This is what our development has done with a business partner. And other examples are, for example, products like the master data governance. So the master data governance is a cloud product which technically runs on ABAP in the cloud, and this is something which is heavily built on the RAP framework. Okay. When to use what? So we So I gave an introduction what options you have with the RAP framework, and we have identified now certain use cases. And there will be soon a white paper published about this, and also our documentation in the next version will contain an introduction for that. And I have leveraged the work of my colleagues here that wrote these white papers, and yeah, and would like to give you here a summary. So think about the first option, that the status quo is that there is no code available. So no custom code so you can completely start from scratch a new application, or you want to build an extension to an existing application, or you want to build a new API. And there we recommend to go for this managed business object implementation. So you start from scratch, you build some tables, CDS views on top, and yeah, that's the way to go there. And it's very easy then also to use draft in these scenarios. The second, another situation might be, or with this is very likely the case if we are talking about existing customers with ECC installation, there is some code available. So then there are two options. First one would be what we call loosely coupled. So loosely coupled means that examples are BAPs, for example, where the UI and the business logic of the UIs and the APIs are not tightly coupled, opposed to the right-hand side. So that means first option would go with an BO implementation with an unmanaged save, so managed BO with an unmanaged save. So if you have that's something you could use if you have reusable APIs, so that are very fine-grained. If they are very coarse-grained, then probably you would have to go for an unmanaged implementation. So and the second use case there is when using so-called custom CDS entities. Custom CDS entities are CDS entities that do not read the data from tables, but from an API, from an ABAP class that implements a certain interface, and then you do some calls to your business logic, and then you retrieve the data. So in this case, an unmanaged business object implementation is the way to go. In case of tightly coupled scenarios, so we can also distinguish several use cases. First of all, that is maybe the unlucky case. So you cannot reuse your custom code. Maybe everything is so baked into each other, then you would have to start from scratch and would go for a managed BO implementation and build something new, completely new. In case there is code available and where the update task can be decoupled, so then you would go for this managed implementation with unmanaged save. So we'll have later a look at this with a business partner, and that's then the way to go. Or if again, when using custom entities, when custom entities have to be used, that means if the business logic would be such that you would not retrieve the data from CDS views, for example, an SEGW project, then an unmanaged BO implementation is the way to go. Then there's also a use case that can be done. You have already invested into the ABAP programming model for SAP Fiori. So that means you have built CDS views, you have added annotations to it, you have built BOP objects. So that's something here. Please note this is then our current planning. The goal is you want to leverage RAP features, right, that are not available in the ABAP programming model for SAP Fiori. That would be, for example, the support for OData version 4. So if there is no need to build this, then you are not forced to do a migration for that, right? So this runtime will still be there; it can still be used. Then it's not a must to change this implementation. But if you want to change this implementation, recommendation is currently to wait, because this is something what's planned to be delivered by our development. We call it BOP, Managed BO Implementation. This will then leverage the existing BO implementation partly, and partly you have to build new stuff. So it's not a completely automated migration. You have to do something manually, but there will be a way to leverage what you implemented in BOPF here. But as I said, this is current planning. And there's also one situation we call it, you build the 101st app, but you do not have a special RAP requirement. So your boss asks you, I want to have a new OData service like all the other nice OData services that you have built so far, for example, with SCGW. Then our recommendation, the first recommendation is, okay, do what you know to do. Maybe you stick to that. But if you want to try out something new and you have the time, and that's definitely also an option to go for the ABAP RESTful programming model, because sooner or later you will have to learn it, because as I will show later on, the new applications from SAP are based on it, and in order to understand this, how it works and how it can be extended later on, you will have to know about the ABAP RESTful programming model. Yeah, that's maybe come for demo. DJ, are there any questions I would have to answer right now?
Well, I mean, why don't we have the demo? There's been some great questions. I've written them all down. And so if you want to do the demo now, and then we'll maybe do the questions at the end, I think that might work well. Because I think we all want to see code on screen now.
Yeah, right. So not okay. Maybe enough now. A little bit about talking. Okay, let's put it down here. Is it readable, or do I have to make it larger? So this is here now an example of the business partner. So maybe let's start with the business partner in the backend. So this is the business partner. So this is a transaction called, now it's called BP. And if you start it, you can create a business partner. That can be a person, organization, or a group. And if you press on person, you can give it a first name like Andre. You see, I did already some testing, right? Now we would try to create here a business partner. We save it, and we see that this business partner has now been created. Let's have a look later on what we can do. So this is the typical SAP GUI transaction. And what we are now on is to have a replacement for this transaction by having a Fiori UI. So we started already to build the business object, which is needed to build the Fiori app. And it is already used in this application that I've showed you here, this master data governance. This technically uses the RAP object behind the scenes. So when you use the cloud-based solution to change, for example, the master data, and like a business partner, then it will call this RAP object on the backend side of a house. So this is now our transaction, but now we want to get away from SAP GUI and go to our implementation using ADT. So this is the business object. So so everything starts with the CDS view. So this is the CDS view that we use, that is behind the business partner. And as you see, it's a very tiny project, right? So we have tons of composition here. So the business partner, you have the roles, the addresses, whatever, and all of this is stored in an own entity from which we navigate from the business partner away. And then we have, in addition, associations. So these point then to other objects, but this is not then combined in a transactional way. What else? So we have then this definition of the CDS view, certain annotations, which properties are used for search and so on. And one moment. Then for this business, for this CDS view, we have a behavior definition. So you remember this from the slides here. Maybe I switch to that. So we have a CDS data model, and we are adding to this the behavior. So this is the behavior definition, this new kid on the block, and it starts with telling us that it is a managed implementation. So it's a managed, and the implementation takes place in this class. We'll have a look at this class later on. And then you will find words like strict behavior. So this is something where when this is defined, the editor makes sure that you do not change the business object in an incompatible way, because it has also been decided to make this object extendable. So this is a new thing. We will see this very soon, that business objects based on the ABAP RESTful programming model can be extended. That means you can add even additional nodes to your business object. And by using the strict message, you make sure that this can be extended. So even if you want to maybe build your own stuff, maybe it's not that important for a Z code, right? Because you could always change your Z code yourself. However, if you have a larger company, think about a big company with lots of subsidiaries, and the central IT folks are building, let's say, an application for the central organization, and they want to have implementations for all the subsidiaries. That could, for example, be done via extensibility. Then we have here a lock master. So if it would be completely managed, right, then we could let the framework do all the locking. But since we are dealing with an unmanaged save, we have also to the locking has to be implemented ourselves. We have to specify the e-tag, which is used for the complete business object. So that means if the whole business object is changed, then this e-tag is changed as well. And here is a draft table. So if I press here F3, you will see, hopefully it starts. Okay, it has already opened. Not sure why it doesn't navigate here. We can press here F8, and we see already that there is some data in it. So the draft table contains some data, and you see here from my user it is, but there are also other users that can store data there. And this way, I wouldn't be able to change data here from that other user, and the other user wouldn't be able to change the data that I'm currently working on. What else? We have actions here that are necessary here for because we are using draft. And what else here? These are nice transactions here. These are static transactions for creating a business partner of type organization, person, or group. And this fits to this buttons you have here. You create a person, organization, and group. We will later see it on the Fiori UI, because when creating a business partner there, we see we get a drop-down menu, and depending on what I choose there, this or that action is started. Then there is a there was a trick the colleagues used here. They have an action update admin data, so that some central admin data in the root instances, this is always updated when a child's object is updated, so to make sure that all the data can be read. And then we start with determinations, and as you can see, I'm just here with the code. So when navigating down, you will find tons of validations. We could also we find them also here then as implementation. So that's the class which implements the business, the behavior definition, and then you have lots of methods that do certain checks. And this was lots of work to do when building this business object, because all these checks are usually baked into the UI of the transaction. So this has to be rebuilt. So that's work you have to do in such a case. And here's some mapping which maps between the nice fields of the CDS views and the names that are used internally, and so on and so on. So, and here we have other behavior definitions. So for the other entities, so all of this is in one object. So the behavior definition contains the definition also for the behavior of the other entities, and we see everything is in one class. It's technically also possible to use several behavior implementation classes. So one, for example, per entity, but that's a decision you would have to take upfront. Okay. What else can we have a look at? We can have a look at the behavior implementation class. So this is now something which is let's say important to know. You see here there is a saver class, and this is called when saving the data. And here we find then actually this call function woopa inbound main save, which is working behind the scenes. And that's a function module I've been told that has not much changed since 4.6c. So this gets lots of data in this structure, which is again a complex structure. And this is a task that we have to do. So we have to map between this data, the data structures we get from the CDS views to that inbound save. And the same function module, as we will later see, is also used for checking. So if we go here, I put some breakpoints in here. So this is where we save. Then there is a validation, for example. If I change any of the entities, then this validation will be called. And here is I'm in the action. so I'm going to create a person. So that's the implementation of this create statement for this person. So this is then called. And as you can see, the colleagues have put all the business logic into a separate class. They call it RAP business logic, that then has certain methods like here, create business partner with address. And here is what I said, there is a validation in the business logic where the same BAP is used here that is used to save the data, that can be used to check the incoming data if this set if a certain flag is set that it runs in a demo mode, not in an update mode. Okay, this now points us to the Fiori app. So that's now the Fiori app here. So maybe start here from scratch. So I have this Fiori Launchpad, and I have here my tile for the Devtoberfest, and that starts the business, the Fiori UI for the business partner. And as I said, this is now planning. This is not an app that is already delivered, but this is an app that will be delivered. We are currently busy with doing development still. So because in the backend implementation, we need a feature that has just been finished. And only if that is available, that so-called late numbering, we are able to, and other, and this also depends on other developments in the backend. But I want to already show this here to you how it will work. So we adapt the filter here. So I will use the, where's my created by? So I want to limit the data to the data that has been created by Andre Fischer. So you see here all the data that I tried. So what we can do is we can create a new business partner. And here you see those three options that I can use. So these are, let's say, the same more or less than the buttons you see here. And looking here in the behavior definition, these are the three actions that are started when pressing here a button. So I can create a person. So then I can enter some data like Andre 55, last name Fischer 55, and then some country. So I'm then in Germany. And I press OK. And that creates a draft already for my object. And now when I start, for example, entering address, I would enter address, test street. Then this is it saves the draft. And if I then press the create button, okay, one of these validations is entered. So I should enter a postal code. But you see here what is still missing in this app, that this nice red star is missing. So it should have told me this, but now, okay. Oh, that's not the post box, the postal code. Okay, also give it a 691 road. Okay, no, you see, the UI is smart, because when I enter a post box, it needs a zip code as well. And it has created some new data here, this Andre Fischer. And also, if I edit this, but then do nothing here, right? I would maybe just enter a house number and navigate back. I will keep the draft I'm asked here, and then the data is in this draft statement, and it won't get lost. And technically, where is my breakpoint that I entered? So if I save that, it doesn't stop at my breakpoint as expected. So I would have to check why not, but let's see why it is not. It's in the save modified. I'll just create from. Okay, now it's in the validation phase, so I'm validating it. Now it's calling this this function module. It checks everything. And again, I'm calling the function module now once again, and now I'm in the save modified phase. And yeah, when I do that, I can change everything. Maybe I should have shown here what is in there, the data. So the good thing was, and that was here, that we are able here to have all the legacy business logic in that function module, so that we can actually call this function module to save the data to the backend. Else, maybe that would then be my demo here for this. So that would be an example on something where we as SAP have used our RAP to rectify a huge business object that we have here, which is based on legacy logic. And yeah, and this is what you get if you work with ABAP. So we have lots of tool sets like for testing purposes and stuff like that. So the development with ABAP in Eclipse is quite nice now. Maybe now switch to some questions you might have.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Andre. That was absolutely superb. And I think the sign of a great presentation is the number of good questions, and we've got some amazing questions. We've got 12 minutes to the top of the hour. Maybe, I mean, if it's okay with folks here, if it's okay with you, Andre, we could go a little bit over that just to make sure we get as many in as we can. So thanks everybody for asking these questions. Let's get the obvious one out of the way. I don't think Andre or I can really answer this officially. Are there any plans to support VS Code instead of Eclipse?
That's a typical question.
That's the $1 million question.
No, this can be. No, I can answer this because it has been answered by my boss already in the last community call. No. So there are no plans to do that. So this is nothing we want to do because it is we have to provide a stable environment. It makes no sense to, let's say, now to go for a new, let's say, a new. To be honest, we are struggling with getting ABAP developers away from the sub GUI to Eclipse. why would that change just with Visual Studio Code?
That's a very good argument, actually. I mean, I'm a big fan of different editors, and but I understand that.
Yeah, and it's a different thing. So we are not.
Yeah.
This development environment is something different than having a simple UI for a web-based application, right? There is much more behind this, and so it would be a huge effort to do this.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Well, but also thank you for answering, Andre. But thank you for asking the question. It's a perennial question, and it needs to be aired. So Mohammed asked a question, but Uwe answered it already. But so let's have that and make sure we all realize that. Mohammed was asking about how one would create a readable description of a method, just like you would do in SE24 when you were using Eclipse, and Uwe pointed Mohammed to ABAP doc. So that was good. Thank you, Uwe. So Swapnil asks, are these features, the stuff that you were showing in the slides, only available with an upgrade of S/4HANA?
Yes. So the ABAP RESTful programming model is, we had the first, maybe here, that's the slide. So we had the first delivery with a very limited feature set in 1909. So there, we do not really recommend to use it unless, let's say, you're 1909 and you are sure to switch to 2020 before going productive.
Mm-hmm.
And because with 2020, we added this support for managed scenarios and draft support. Okay, here we would have to be a bit more specific. With Feature Pack 1, we have then OData version 4 support. So the Feature Pack 1 would be the way to go. There are still some, let's say, limitations, or I would say better restrictions. That's the official term here, better. That with some key laid-out numbering stuff like late numbering, for example, this is going to be delivered, planned to be delivered with 2021 or an upcoming Feature Pack 1, right? Mm-hmm. So that's then we are in the full scope. But so let's say with 2020, you can already start.
Cool. Thanks, Andre. And thanks for the question, Swapnil. So Mohit asks an interesting question in the pipeline. In the pipeline, is there a graphical way of creating the UI? He's talking about maybe UML diagrams to show the relationship between different views, composite views, interfaces, and so on.
Okay, we have you mean a UI with the you mean Fiori UIs, or is it?
I'm not sure what Mohit was asking about.
Yeah, so
I think just generally a graphical way of representing this stuff.
Yeah. So what you have here is something we call the Relation Explorer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can make this a little bit larger. So that shows you what's here behind this business object, right? Or so that allows you here to navigate certain stuff like determination, and then you are in that.
Cool. Okay, that's nice. That's nice. That's a nice way to navigate it. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Mohit, and thanks, Andre. So Marcus asked a question that Uwe Fetzer answered already, but let's have that out loud again. What software components have to be integrated to ADT for this? And Uwe said, quite rightly, basically the RAP development is built into ADT.
Yeah.
So that's great. Thanks, Uwe. So I think Uwe and I are both fans of SE38, and maybe even also, I don't want to date Uwe like me, but TM38 as well. Anyway, Nikhil asks, is the transaction buffer, you were talking about the transaction buffer on one of your slides there, is it really a persisted version of the data in the DB or in shared memory? He's thinking of, considering these calls are effectively normally stateless.
The transactional buffer is it just lives during your ABAP session, right? So it's something that goes away once your session is out, is finished, right? Then you won't have access to that anymore. The data is actually saved from the transactional buffer to draft tables. So this is where we really persist the data on the database in order to have the option to have stateless UIs against such a backend. So this is why we invented this draft support.
Gotcha. Thank you. So Mitch asked a question about VDM basic views, which I don't quite understand. So I'm going to read the question out, and I'm sure we'll get there. So Mitch asks, should we use the VDM basic views? This seems to be a BO question.
VDM basic view? You mean maybe VDMs of the virtual data model?
Yeah, the virtual. The
virtual data
VDM.
model.
Yeah,
this is how we call this data modeling, right? This would be the so-called you can reuse stuff from SAP if you like, right? So if it is, but then you should check whether these are released CDS views. So we have certain CDS views that have a flag being released, so they won't change to be, for example, upgrade stable. And this would be here the I layer, so the interface view layer, and this is the projection layer, in former times called C, or that it has a C layer because it in former times it was consumption layer.
Yeah.
So here these are basically the two layers, but in a VDM model you have then here on this layer probably more, even more layers like internal views that are used for calculations. But yes, the VDM model is a recommended one, and it is used in S/4HANA.
Perfect. Thanks, Andre. So here's a question from Uwe. Uwe, you're not allowed to ask questions. You're only allowed to answer questions, but we'll allow this just one time. Uwe says, can we switch later from managed to unmanaged, or from unmanaged to managed, if we realize down the line that we made the wrong decision?
Let me think. Yes and no. So okay, if you have a managed implementation, right, you would have those tables, right? And if you would then go for unmanaged, you would have then to write a code that would then write into these tables. From unmanaged to managed, I don't see an option to go for that. Or if you have the option to carve out certain things, you might be able to have a managed approach with an unmanaged save. So, but I don't see it that easy to switch between the models. So you would have first to give it a thought. What applies to your scenario?
Good answer. Think about it first.
and maybe start with developing, let's say, some simple apps. Maybe start. I can also recommend my RAP generator to play around a little bit. So just to get an, let's say, project that it's up and running, and then you add some implementation, right? You should try out probably with things that are not the ones you have to deliver within 2 weeks time frame, right? It's something you have to learn, but what I saw is that especially experienced ABAP developers, they have a steep learning curve here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for answering that. There's 2 more questions until the top of the hour, but I'm going to make an executive decision, if it's okay with you, Andre, to just go 5 minutes over, because we've got some more questions. We have to, draw a line at some stage, but let's keep going, if that's okay with people. So here's another example of where somebody's asked a question and somebody else has answered it. So I want to sort of acknowledge that and give them a shout out. So Vishal was asking about the advantages of going to this new model and moving away from BOP. And Utilligence, I'm not sure the person's name, but Utilligence GmbH answered, I mean, the new model gives enhanced flexibility and basically better integration into the RAP model, sort of by design, right?
Yeah, it has better options for, let's say, extensibility, and let's say it's the future, right? So, but as I said, if you have a up and running application based on this BOP implementation, it will keep running, right? So there is no need for immediate action to move away from that, right? But if you are now building a new implementation and you are, for example, on 2020, I would strongly recommend to go for this ABAP restful programming model, because it, as you see, all the complete development in SAP S/4HANA has moved to that. And later on, if you have to do extensions and stuff like that, yeah, then you are in this new kind of stuff. Still, let's say even an old transaction might, will continue to run in an S/4HANA system. But if you want to build code, especially maybe moving away, moving your implementation at a certain point in time to an S/4HANA cloud-based system, or if you would use this embedded Steampunk option, then there the only implementation model is the RAP model.
Gotcha. Thanks, Andre. By the way, Andre, would you mind stopping your screen share so that we both appear on the thing? So it looks so I think because the video keeps switching. So here's another question. I can't put my glasses on. Here's another question from Mitch, actually, and maybe I should have asked this sort of at the same time as the other one because it's sort of related. Mitch asks, should the analytical cubes be built on top of the root entity views, or should one build structures for analytical purposes only?
That's a good question. We have a script around his. So yeah, the idea is you can build on top of these root entities, you can build then cubes. Maybe you need an additional interface layer then, right? But we have an exercise out there that you could run if you have your own Steampunk system. Unfortunately, it only would work to a certain extent in an trial system, because the trial systems cannot be connected to SAC, unfortunately, to the trial versions there. But yes, that's exactly the idea, to leverage the, let's say, the transactional data to have what we call real-time analytics.
Excellent. Thanks, Andre, and thanks for a great question, Mitch. So Gary, my running friend Gary, asks, which SAP version introduces the BP transaction that you demoed? Is it? And also Andrew Fordham asked, is that a Fiori Elements app?
No, the BP transaction was a real transaction. I would have to look it up. With which version? So it was newly introduced, this BP transaction at some time in SAP S/4HANA. But if you search for BP transaction, you will find a blog. There's a lengthy blog post about this. Cool. Of somebody who is explaining all the screens that are behind this. So I just scratched a little bit on top of this.
Perfect.
And I'm not an application guy, so I cannot really explain all these details behind the business part.
That's okay. That's okay. But also related.
But one thing, the Fiori app that I showed is not part yet of SAP S/4HANA. So this was something we are working on. But as you can see, this is something which will come. So there is a little bit is missing so that we can deliver it. So it would work to a certain extent, but not as stable as you would expect it from a product from SAP to be delivered, right?
Gotcha. Tibi asked on a related note, I think, was that SAP GUI and was that 7.7 question mark?
Maybe.
Maybe. That's for you.
I use the version which is installed on my laptop, right? So it might be a newer version which is not yet out.
You saw it here first, folks. That's good. That's a good answer. So Nikhil and Kishore were both asking about the entity manipulation language, about EML. I think it was Nikhil. I might be wrong. I think it was Nikhil that was saying it was a little bit painful to use. Kishore was asking whether it would be possible to, or whether it would be an idea to have wrapper classes around that.
The EML is exactly so. The entity manipulation language is using RAP. So a RAP facade is something. This is what we actually did. So we call it a RAP facade. So we are calling the legacy business logic of using this function module. So we have wrapped around this the RAP object, and then we are able to call it via EML. And this is, for example, also done by this master data stuff, which has a separate RAP object, which is calling this, so to have staging and stuff like that. And the nice thing with the EML, so though it's maybe not what I would say easy to learn, right? You have the same approach then with all RAP objects. So once you have learned EML once, you're able to do even stuff like deep inserts and things like that. So EML is very powerful, and it shows that a RAP object does not have to have a UI necessarily, right? Yeah. So this is how we also now delivered the business partner. So the BO is already in S/4HANA, and it is used by applications on this EML level, but not yet as a Fiori UI. And so EML is a very powerful thing. It allows you also to test your data with EML statement. So you can do testing on the EML level, so you don't have to start on the OData level, right? And and in addition, you have testing options on method level. So
gotcha.
There are different options.
Perfect. Thanks, Andre. So I know, folks, there are so many more questions coming through, but we have to call it a day at some stage. I just want to give a shout out to, there's lots of people asking some amazing questions, but also answering. So Andy Glensel, thank you for answering some of those questions there as well. There was a great question, which I would love to ask about unit tests and ABAP unit from Ian, but you know, that
we have there is a nice script out there that it's a hands-on about unit testing with RAP. So on these different levels, what I said, testing on OData level, testing via EML, and on method level. So it's on this. Where would maybe we will put it afterwards underneath.
I'll speak to you, Andre, and we'll put it on the best practices week README markdown page on the repo. That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, that's really best practicing then.
Exactly. So this is one thing I love about this community. So Vignesh has come on to say, DJ, the BP app is a Fiori Elements app, and it's new. Should be 2009 or 2101 release. So thank you, Vignesh. There we go. So I'm going to say one thing to wrap up, and then I'll just hand over to you, Andre, for the final words. It seems to me that, in a way, RAP itself is best practice. Right at the start, you said that basically it's now the universal. It's both greenfield and brownfield. It's for cloud and on-premise. So, you know, it seems to be the go-to model, full stop.
Yeah, it's best practices in a way, because you know we had other programming models before, say SAP GUI, WebDyn Pro, and then we moved to this ABAP Fiori programming model based on BOP. But it turned out that we used BOP there, but it was not designed for certain things, right? So there were limitations or technical restrictions we were not able to come around, and especially. Yeah, this is a requirement. We have to provide an option to develop in ABAP so cloud, that it runs in the cloud, stable, and this is what you can really say that the ABAP RESTful programming model is best practices. So it's what we found out is needed, and and you can even go with this ABAP RESTful programming model and even this cloud-based approach later on premise. We call it then the sandbox-based approach, so that you could build code that is totally upgrade stable, because you're not, you will only rely on released APIs. Some say it's an ABAP restricted language. I personally find this term negative, right? It is more stabilized, right? By restricting ourselves to released APIs, the code becomes upgrade stable.
Constraints are good.
But just the term of restricted ABAP sounds, I can do less. Yes and no, but you can do more in the future. You don't have to rebuild all the stuff. You have less testing when upgrading, and this saves money in the end.
Perfect. So, Andre, thank you so much for a brilliant presentation, great demo, and thanks for answering all those questions. And thanks everybody
thank you for these questions. Are very good. So it shows us what the people want to know. And if there are more questions, okay, you can also post them in the community. So we have there for ABAP RESTful programming model a tag, and me and other colleagues are watching it, and also lots of other people from the community. And that's what I like. So it's not just this one-man approach that one person answers. So lots of other people are willing to help there.
Perfect. So I'm just putting one link in the chat, which is the link to the Week 2 Best Practices page of the DevToberfest.
And there we would put, would put what comes to my mind now, and
exactly. Perfect. Thank you everybody so much for joining and having brilliant chat and conversation. So it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Andre.
Goodbye.
Thanks. Perfect. We're off.